I wasn't actually talking. I was doing the intro video. um, welcome to because that's what we like to hear, right? Welcome to another episode of Supportive Advice Live, where we make live mistakes. So I'm gonna invite you to speak again, Mo. Um, yeah, I'm trying something new, doing an intro video. I did hear you say hello, and so did everyone else. How you doing today?
I'm so sorry. You know how the app be sometimes.
Oh no, it's cool. It's cool for real. It really, really is. Cause I didn't get nobody a warning, no way. Um, so how you been?
I'm okay. How are you?
I am good. So I have some okay. So I have some things planned as it relates to like a direction in which the show could take. But before I do that and go there, um, what's on your heart today?
What's on my heart today?
Yep.
Uh, I'm sitting in the parking lot. I've probably been sitting in the parking lot. I need to go into the store for about the last 15 minutes. Just trying to decompress and, you know, just, I don't know where I'm at today. I'm just trying to decompress from my day, from my week.
Now, is it things specifically going on at work, or is it kind of a buildup of things that has been going on for a certain period of time?
Mm, well, I work with, young adults,
Mm-hmm.
young teenagers, and I work with a range of from criminal behavior to suicidal ideations to attempt to suicides to mood disorder, personality disorder. And to have so many people pull on you all day,
Yeah, that could be rough.
it's, it can be draining. And I said, oh my goodness, when I pay attention to all the jobs that I've had, they're basically emotionally, mentally draining.
Yeah.
So, hmm
And so when you say that, I hear you describing a pattern. Where do you think that comes from? That you seek out these types of experiences where you're able to give yourself in that way.
um, I think that's more of a calling. Um, I think that's something that I'm called to do. As in the areas that I go into, and um, I can't really say that. I guess it is something I seek out, but I know it's something I'm called to. I'll just say that. Like, I know many women, I deal with a lot of women and a lot of young women who dealt with a lot of trauma. I deal with a lot of people from the inner city. Um, and actually all the areas that I just spoke about, except, well, I did hit on criminal justice a little bit. Yeah.
So, is this your role specifically as a chaplain in which you deal with these individuals, or is it in another capacity?
So actually, when you talk about, no, for my chaplain job, I deal with people who been diagnosed with like serious diagnosis, from knowing they're about to die in a few weeks or a few months, to getting their legs cut off, to their babies dying. So it's a wide range of um things I deal with emotionally with those who are in a hospital setting. So I'm a chaplain in a hospital setting. And my other role, I am a supervisor over residents, teenagers.
Oh, okay. Okay, so we're talking about
Two different
two
jobs.
different places of employment.
Correct.
Both of them quite emotionally taxing, though.
Very.
Yeah, it's similar when you discuss being a chaplain. It's similar to hospice or very significant change of life
Hmm.
events. And so when I hear that, I would say that if I were working with these individuals, it might be from an adjustment perspective. Now, granted, there's crisis therapy, that I can do, but it would also be from an adjustment perspective. So, for instance, someone lost a child. Now, as a chaplain, you would talk to them and you would deal with them in that moment, in that crisis. However, from when it gets to my perspective, people would seek out maybe ongoing counseling to learn how to adjust, to learn how to deal with long term grief, to understand the emotions around self worth as it goes to this child died, and how that affects how I see my role as a woman and as a mother and as a capable person to be able to bring forth life. So definitely understand how that can be emotionally taxing. Very curious as well as to how you create emotional boundaries in those types of settings.
So when you mention about boundaries, I need you to hit and be a little specific on as in what area and what you're speaking of when you talk about certain boundaries. Are you talking about spiritual boundaries, emotional boundaries,
Emotional boundaries.
So being a chaplain, one, you are human,
Yes,
right?
yes, of course.
And so imagine someone asking you to bless their baby that just died and they're in your hand. The baby is in your hand. It's not like an 8-pound baby, it's like a 4-pound baby. And they want you to pray over their baby, they want you to touch their baby. Um, imagine imagine you speaking to someone, another mother, and this lady has a 16-year-old daughter like you, and her daughter is dying of cancer,
Mm,
um and so sometimes you deal with you deal with families and situations, and it may remind you of a loved one at home. It may remind you of a family member outside of your home, and it will hit you and make you think of things differently. So okay, I couldn't imagine. So I had a situation where a young lady broke, a lot of her bones were broken, and her daughter was around the same age as mine was. I was looking at the mother, and I just, how she was crying and everything, all those things. um it affects you as well. And so some people say, well, you got to learn how to separate this and that. Yes, there is a separation when it comes to some things, but as a chaplain, you're taught to notify, look at your own emotions and where you are at in the process of talking to someone, and trying to assess where they're at emotionally, and if they ask for you to speak about something spiritual. And so then not only that, so your baby, all her bones broken, right? Think about your own family, you're one of your kids, right? Then they may ask you, well, where was God? Well, where I believe in the Lord, and then now they don't believe, or they're struggling with their belief because something happened to them and their child. Do you get what I'm saying? And so there's so many different dynamics that you deal with. I had a young man, his leg was getting cut off, right? he had
Jeez.
diabetes,
Whoa.
and he's only 23. He's like, I've never been married. Is a woman going to want to marry me? And I'm 23. But knowing his situation, and because I've had plenty of males in my family who suffer from diabetes and who also didn't listen to the doctors and got their legs cut off, it sadly to say, I knew that he was probably going to get his other leg cut off. But I could not, that's a boundary. I couldn't share that with him. That's something for his doctor, but I had to help him process that. And so, and then you think about as being an older woman and this young man who is not married, and now I want to be married. I'm not married. And so, could you imagine thinking about yourself? Sometimes we got to put ourselves in other people's shoes, to kind of understand possibly a little bit of what they're going through. And many times we don't self reflect. Um, about what others may be going through when they share things. We only see it from one perspective versus looking at what if it was me. And so,
That can be a great thing, right? Looking at
mhm,
it from a very humanistic perspective. It's
mhm,
also important to have emotional boundaries to dissuade from projection, right?
mhm,
If
true.
I am so far into how I would feel if it were me, am I
Mhm,
then in an emotional place to be able to be there in an objective way for someone else?
mhm,
And so it's
yeah.
really important as well to be able to have those emotional boundaries. Now, self as a therapist is when you understand as a therapist, and I understand our titles are definitely different, but we deal with very
Mhm,
serious things within both of our roles. Self as a therapist helps you understand that you are always learning and growing with your client,
mhm,
whether or not they see you as the expert. Is really neither here nor there, because as a human you are forever growing, you are forever adjusting, and every scenario that you go through with your clients, it pulls a part of you and it grows a part of you. Now there are some therapists that do a lot of what is called self exposure, where they talk about similar experiences, and they use that as a way to build rapport. There are other therapists such as myself that do not do a lot of uh, self exposing, and I think that for me it's not because I have something to hide, because I do a lot of self exposure on on the podcast, but I think that it's important to make enough room for the client by making sure that you are being completely present for them.
correct. I so agree. So when you talked about boundaries and self disclosure and disclosing things, each scenario is different. And so I agree with what you say. And I would say that
Thank you. Yeah, I did mean self disclosure. I don't know what I was. Mo. Uh oh. I can't hear you anymore, Mo. I think your microphone may have went out. Uh, okay, I hear you now. I was just saying you're right. Self disclosure is what I was meaning to say. Thank you for um, introducing that correct wording. And absolutely, I do agree with you that every case is different. 150%. There is also, the part about, becoming worn down though. And if we don't recognize our emotional capacity, if we don't recognize our spiritual capacity, just like if we try to lift something, and I'm talking from a physical perspective, we're at a gym and we try to lift something that's too heavy, we're not building muscle at that point as much as we're creating an injury. And so when we don't know our capacity in an emotional perspective, and we don't know our capacity from a mental health perspective, as it relates to dealing with certain things and projecting and self disclosure and things of that nature, we're also setting ourselves up to create an injury which might look like a trauma. What are your thoughts on that?
I so agree. One of the things that, like, so say for instance, as a chaplain, we have so many hours we have to do, right? As in learning, even counseling. And what I have learned, as when you talk about self care, that's important,
Oh, yeah.
but also many people who are counselors and psychologists and chaplains who help other people from pastors, they don't get the help that they need themselves, um uh as in counseling themselves. So most people, like even social workers, I know a lot of social workers used to be one, many would not get the help that was provided or given to them, to decompress and to have emotional balance.
Uh oh, you were saying something very profound. I'm interested, but your
like
mic went out.
like I always would say, I'm so surprised that we're all taught to have get self help, and we know about counseling, or we speak about counseling from different perspectives, but the professionals usually don't go get the help that they need themselves. They don't invest in the self care of talking to someone, to share their thoughts and their feelings and what they're going through. And for me, I have to see someone because, first of all, I think speaking to another individual is important, but also because my jobs are so taxing
Oh
emotionally,
yeah.
I need to let go of things. I have my own personal things that's going on top of all these other people who are pulling on me, and also what's expected of me, as in my um, job. So it's interesting to me, those of us who work in public settings or helping people, we may talk about getting counseling or what other people need, but we don't do it ourselves.
Absolutely. Yeah, I have client base um, of individuals that are also doctors, individuals that are also, therapists or counselors or social workers, and so on and so forth. And that lets me know that there are a percentage of people that are getting the help, but you're absolutely right, not enough. Not enough. And then there is this, well, one client that I spoke with, that was in possibly the mental health profession. There is this thought process that, well, you should know better. You're in the field, so you should know. And interestingly enough, what we should know is how much help is important. If we don't know anything, if we value the things that we do, we should know 100% how valuable the help is. But I do want to go back to emotional boundaries. We talked about the fact that the work itself is taxing. We talked about the fact that you're in real life traumatic situations, where you're saying someone might be asking you to hold a baby that has passed away, a 4 pound preterm baby, and bless this child. You know, even if you haven't gone through that, that is something that could be, it could bring about shock. It could bring about anxiety. It could bring about, a lot of different type of emotions. Personally, when you go home, what things are you doing so you're not carrying that baby with you? you're not carrying that experience with you into your car, down the street, into your home, into your bed, and into your subconscious.
Well, that's actually, I mean, some things you will take home with you, whether you want to or not. And so, but some of the things that I do, what I like to do is journal and write.
Okay.
And so, writing helps me release the things that I am feeling, or just getting things off my chest. I like to walk now that it's cold. I can't stand when the winter comes because all my healthy habits are more
Right.
in the in the
Yeah.
warmth. I like to sit on the porch. I like to stare at the trees and observe nature. I like to take walks. In the wintertime, I can't sit on the porch. You know what I'm saying?
Right. I mean, you could, but you might get frostbite.
I could, but I ain't, I don't want to sit outside and observe the trees and the snow or anything. And
Right.
so it's a little bit more difficult for me when the seasons change because those things that I really enjoy are outside. Um, and so right now I do enjoy writing, so that's something.
Okay.
And I go to the gym on and off now. Once my father passed, I got away from my working out, and so I called myself starting back up again. And now that I have this new position, the hours are not consistent, and so that plays a part of when your schedule is not consistent. It's kind of I have various hours. I'm trying to think of what's the term. It's not a set schedule. So one day I might work this hours. Then like Monday and Tuesday I might work 9 to 5. And Wednesdays I work 1 to 9. And it's so scattered that it's kind of hard to come up with a routine when you don't have a set schedule. But what I do like to do is meditate and write. So that's what helps me a lot of times is writing. And I sit in my car. Like I'm sitting in my car right now. I'm not in the house. I'm not. I don't want to talk to nobody. Really, I'm doing this. And so before I go into my family, sometimes I have to sit in the car just to collect my thoughts and oh, the heat is on, so I guess I'm still outside.
You are still outside.
Right. So
So for those
yeah.
individuals that are listening, if you have any tips and tricks that you typically use to decompress and also to create emotional boundaries. I definitely would love to hear. We are always taking callers here on Call In. If you're watching on Facebook, if you're watching on YouTube, if you look at the bottom, it shows every way that you can get in contact with us live and when you're watching the replay. So definitely take a look at that and make sure that you subscribe so that you can see when we are on. We also have a way for you to let us know different topics that you might want to talk about, different questions that you might want to talk about. You can always feel free to DM me on Instagram or Facebook. And again, Facebook is slash supportive advice. Instagram is Aquila Wheatley LMFT, no spaces. And so definitely feel free to reach out to us there. You can also go to www.supportiveadvice.com/media, and there is a way for you to actually submit questions, topics, anything that you might want to talk about, so that we can hear your voice even if it's not live on air. With that being said, emotional boundaries are more or less ways of purposely disconnecting. And I know that to some people you, it might not sound like something a therapist would teach someone. However, to avoid becoming burnt out, you can imagine that you have 10 diamonds and your energy is represented by these 10 diamonds. If you give out all 10 diamonds on the first client that you see, or in Monicia's case, Mojo's case, she's a chaplain. On the first person that comes to you and asks for you to pray, what do you have left for yourself? What do you have left for your family? What do you have left for the next day? And I think that that's the part that individuals don't typically think about. So there is a part of us that does have to disconnect, and though it helps build rapport for us to look at things from the perspective of others, it's important to do that more from a logical perspective than diving in from an emotional perspective, because again it makes things hazy. It can cause more projection, and then it blurs the lines between us and our clients as it relates to the type of advice that we might give them, whether we're doing it from our expertise or from our heart and our emotions during that time, which we know can be fickle. So I definitely want to teach on emotional boundaries. One of the things that I do, if for those of you who didn't hear me say this earlier, is I choose not to self disclose. That allows me to keep the focus on the client, but there's also a level of personal detachment. They don't know anything about me. I'm not talking about myself in a way that then creates any type of fear of judgment from the client, right? But I'm also creating a space that's judgment free for the client, because I'm not saying how I would actually handle these things. I'm using techniques. I'm telling them general psychological terms, or using different types of methods and techniques to assist them versus diving into what I may or may not do in my personal life. And so part of that gives a healthy detachment, right? Because detachment in certain fields can very well be healthy. For instance, you know, if you are a teacher and you teach, 25, 30 children, you cannot attach to emotionally to every single, one of those children, because then you're going to be teaching based off of wanting them to like you, versus wanting them to respect you. There's a level of detachment that you have to have as a pastor. There's a level of detachment that you have to have in any field that allows you to be able to remain professional. And so that is more or less what I am trying to teach. And anybody who has any type of ways that they kind of detach in a healthy way. Obviously, I'm not talking about apathy, which can happen when you don't emotionally attach appropriately. If anybody has anything that they do personally, I would love to hear it. While we are waiting to see who responds to that, if we get a response to that, I am going to bring on Dante, who we know lovingly as Mr. Machismo.
While we're waiting for Dante, you mentioned being um, not being attached and how it helps with boundaries. One of the things that, what did you call it? I forgot the term. This, what did you say?
That whole thing was real long winded, so I'm gonna need you to help me out.
Uh, okay, detachment. Detachment. When you talk about being, what is the term? Is it detached? What did you say? Oh God.
Emotionally detached, or when I said something about apathy.
Okay, emotionally detached. Okay. So anyway, One of the things you're right, and when you mentioned the word advice, and so even being a chaplain or working with several different people, you know, that it's unhealthy for my profession. I'm not giving anyone any advice. We're kind of taught to I mean, really, when you talk about professionalism and different things, you know, as a chaplain, I'm not giving advice. We're helping process thoughts and decisions, for people to problem solve on their own.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you may give them some, by listening to their emotion, if they express that they're sad, they're angry, happy, disgusted, trying to find out the root of why they're disgusted. Um, just kind of doing some searching of where they're at and what they would like to share. And no, you do not disclose. Now, sometimes, like you said, some therapists may disclose some things, but again, it depends on the person's style. So, like, I do both. Um, but again, it just depends on the scenario, and it is important to, as in professionalism, as not be so attached. But however, each setting is different as well. Um, uh, pastor would be something totally different from a chaplain in some ways. It's the same. It's kind of like the same job, but it's a little different. As a chaplain working at a hospital, I may see somebody once or twice versus me having a congregation seeing someone on an ongoing basis. Like even at work, let's talk about work and being professional from your coworkers to your clients. Being a correction officer, I will work 16 hours, 8 hours a day with people 5 days out the week. You're going to build a rapport with some of these people. So you're going to have feelings for people, but not in a, well, I can't speak for everybody, but not in a way that it's inappropriate. You still have ethics, you still have character, you still have integrity as an individual, depending on the individual. So I think it's different depending on what it is, how it is, and the relationships and the reports within different settings. So,
Absolutely. And I would be apt to take away the word advice and use the word advisement, because even in a case where someone's looking at you and they're saying to you, I'm 23 years old and my leg just got cut off, is anybody going to want me? They're looking for something. They're looking for something from you, whether it is reassurance, whether it is disclosure, whether it is whatever it is. They're looking for something from you. No one asks that question to someone without wanting something in return. And so whenever there is rapport, I have clients that I have been seeing for years, and I have clients that I've just started seeing, and I'm still building a level of rapport with. Whether or not there is someone that I'm seeing, have been seeing for years, or someone that I just started seeing, the emotional boundaries isn't for them, it's for me. It is to allow for my longevity, is to make sure that I am not having a conversation with one client and then going into a session with another client with that other client still on me. So it is relevant in many different settings. Even as a chaplain, I would assume that you don't just see one person in a day, especially at a hospital. And so If I don't create emotional boundaries, then I'm bringing in all of these feelings that I'm having that maybe I haven't had a chance to process from the previous person that I talked to now into this situation, whether it is on purpose, accidentally, consciously, subconsciously. So it's important to understand that the emotional boundaries are not for the client, there for us so that we can continue to serve in the manner in which we do.
I agree.
Um Now that we have Mr. Machismo on, how you doing, sir? Or not? No, but while Mr. Machismo gets his sound together, I think that Mo, you had a lot of amazing insight, because you don't want to be detached in a way where you're unfeeling, and I think that that is definitely a great point that you're making, because when you're dealing with individuals with trauma, you don't want to be detached in a way that it's evident, where you're not able to do minimal encouragers, you're not able to be in the moment with them, be present in the moment with them, or even say something to let them know that you understand on some level what they could possibly be going through. And even though that is important, with again without that emotional boundary for us, then we keep taking it. We take it with us, and then it keeps going and it keeps going, and eventually we don't have anything left, because again, if we likened our energy to diamonds and we have 10 diamonds in a day, if we're passing these things out and we're not creating that boundary so that they're not as accessible, we're not gonna have anything for ourselves, we're not gonna have anything for our family, we're not gonna have anything for that next client, that next patient, that next person. And then what it tends to look like, unfortunately, is we're past our capacity, and now all of a sudden we're dealing in apathy, and that's just, that can be a hard deal to get out of. No, we cannot hear you. And thank you, Mark, for joining. We appreciate you. Mojo, thank you for reaching out to Mark there on the chat. Um, and did you have any other thoughts as it relates to emotional boundaries, Mo? I think you have a lot of great perspective.
So when you talk about emotional boundaries, you made me think about something as in taking time.
Oh yes,
So I would say there will be some. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. So I know some chaplains who would run to the next room and go see someone right away. Some scenarios you have no choice, you have to run to right away. But there's some you can spread out your time to see someone else so you can even decompress in a small amount of time so you can handle the next patient or client that you're seeing. And when you talked about decompressing, um, there's just so many different things that can be done. And in the boundary part, when you talk about boundaries, it makes me think about there's this great book called Healthy Boundaries. And I think his name is, I can't think of his name, but he has a book in a workbook. I want to say Sakarsa, something like that. But he has a great book about having healthy boundaries. And many times we're not taught what healthy boundaries are, right? And just small things. Okay, if I'm working these hours, these are my hours. And so sometimes we may love what we do, we may love
Hmm.
to help people, but we're too accessible when you're talking about
Yes.
being accessible. No, you have to have, like you said, you do have to have boundaries because on you as if they can't function without you. Now you're depending on me, and that's not a good thing.
Mm.
And it's not their fault. It's actually your fault when you allow people to continue to pull on you, and not have a certain set of boundaries in different times. And so when you talked about kind of time and balance, that is important. And many people don't know what healthy boundaries is. Many people weren't taught. It's so many different areas to have boundaries. One of the things that I always said that surprised me, when we talk about spiritually. We talk about, you mentioned the pastor and because I'm a chaplain, and when you're in congregation settings, right?
Mhm.
Um, when I think about even group dynamics, we just had a prayer call and talked about it. Many people don't get the necessary training, that they need when they're dealing with certain people. Like, I never understood. I went to seminary, and we had all these theological classes. Now, one of the things I do want to share with you, I always wanted to be a counselor, and when I applied for one of my first mentor and my favorite mentor, she's a psychiatrist. She has her own practice here and also in Florida. I love her, and so there were so many things that she taught me, but I could never understand why didn't they have anything on group dynamics. Okay, so you're a pastor, but we don't. Where if there's not a course on group dynamics, you're dealing with a group of people. Um, you're dealing with. You're just dealing with so many different things. It was some things I didn't understand, and so for my counseling classes, oh, I love them. I got straight A's and O's. I didn't really want to go. I didn't really want to go to seminary. That's not something I wanted to do. That's something that I was commissioned to do for those who understand that. And so my counseling classes, I enjoyed. I got straight A's in those. And then when it came to theology, it was kind of like, some of it I enjoyed depending on who my professor was, but my main thing was counseling. And so I just, when you talk about different dynamics and different support and different boundaries, there are things that's not taught, to pastors per se in some settings, as into having boundaries, as into having healthy conversations, or it's so many different things that I feel that's lacking in that um, core work that's provided. Besides, Old Testament and New Testament, some other things that need to be added in those things. But I was sharing with some individuals, if we're working with different things, sometimes people shouldn't. I'm not gonna say that. Let me change my. We have to invest in some of the things that we do, and some of the places that we volunteer. We need to invest in certain areas to assist us and to assist those people as well, to help whatever your purpose is, if that makes sense. I just,
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now I'm curious, when you were talking about the book Healthy Boundaries, were you talking about the book by Chase Hill?
no, I think his name is Dr. Townsend. It's him and Scasario. I can't say his name properly, but it's two psychologists, and they work together on different books. And it's kind of like on a spiritual, but also from the psychologist's point of view. But they talk about healthy boundaries, and they talk about different personalities that you're dealing with. I'll send a picture to you,
Oh,
but
you talking about Dr. John Townsend
yeah, I
and
think that's
him
his
and
name. Yeah,
Dr. Henry Cloud, Boundaries, when to say yes, when to say no,
yeah,
to take control of
yeah,
your life. Okay, so
yeah. That's them.
I'm gonna go ahead and I'll put the link in there for anyone that's interested in that book. Um, and I also want to say, as far as like emotional boundaries are concerned, is really interesting because even something as small as spatial relation, can help with boundaries. The how far or how close you stand to the person that you're talking to, whether or not you extend a touch to that person, or whether or not you allow that person to extend touch to you. All of those things, even though they seem just like just physical, are also emotional. Thank you. Yes, yes. Thank you so much, Jed. I appreciate you. He said this is a great topic and conversation. I appreciate that. So, even though it seems like it's just physical, it also is about attachment and connectedness, and it's also a way to create emotional boundary. Now, when you are in a space where you are, like you said, you're a chaplain, how do you create different spatial boundaries that might help with client attachment? Mojo.
Okay, so oh boy, you're gonna have me bring the book out because you got secure attachment. You have all these different forms of attachment, right?
Of
And
course.
it depends. It depends on the individual and their background and all that. However, for me, in a hospital setting, um, I believe in being distant. Really, I'm not too close, but I'm not too far away. But again, it depends on each scenario. It's different. If a mom who just lost her baby, she may need a different type of support from someone. We're talking about. I saw you. I'm on the phone call. You screaming. Be quiet. I was trying to scare you out of the car. My daughter tried to scare me on the side of the car, but I tell her all the time I pay attention to my surroundings, and she be on her phone. I'm on my phone. I pay attention to my surroundings. I grew up in the hood. Okay, but anyway, secure attachment versus someone who does not have a secure attachment. The more you work with a group of people, you understand, and from your training. But I'll just say in certain scenarios, a mother who had her child just gave birth to her child and the child is no longer with her. You may give her a different type of attention and a different type of space um, versus someone else. And then let's talk about male and female, right? I have a thing with touching. So some people aren't comfortable with touching. And as a professional, even when we talk about in church settings, you have to be careful as a male and a female touching another individual.
For sure.
Your hands, you really should not be touching anyone as the opposite sex. There's just different things that should not happen, but many people are not trained on those things, so they don't know. So, say for instance, let's talk about, since we're talking about settings and space, and so when you talk about the church, sometimes we have people who make sure they may get slain in the spirit and things of that nature. There's a certain amount of space that should be given to the opposite sex, and you still can catch them, you still can do a certain thing, and it's honestly it's better to have the same sex, but that's not always provided within different denominations and different settings because each church does different things, right? And you should never.
You are
This
gonna
is the
shoot
thing.
us to death, Mo.
Okay. Let me not say shit. Okay, there should be something. Okay, I'm still using shit. I just use shit, so you're gonna have to work with it today. Um, when it comes to like being in the office with someone, you have to be careful because people have different experiences, different backgrounds, and they can take something that is not. I could be in the office with a male, and he could think that I'm flirting, and I'm not flirting. You get what I'm saying? And so you got to make sure the door is open a little. So I don't. I don't know where I'm going with this, but there's certain boundaries and things you should do to assist yourself as professionals and individuals, because of other people mindsets and other people experiences and backgrounds and thought and perspective, if that makes sense. Sorry, I did ramble, but
It does.
I
It makes sense. It makes sense. However, I definitely want to say that no matter what type of attachment someone has, where you're talking about secure, insecure attachment, or secure, unsecure attachment, um, it's not as relevant as you might think in these cases because they're going through a trauma. And so what happens during trauma is what? Trauma bonding. So if I just lost a baby, or I just lost my leg, or or I just found out that I'm dying of cancer, and it's stage 4 or whatever the case may be. I'm going through a trauma, and traumas don't necessarily follow the same script as natural attachment styles, right? Because I'm in an anxious state, and it's going to more or less likely be a more anxious attachment because I'm looking for something to get me out of this space. I'm looking for someone to grab hold to. I'm looking for someone who might understand what I'm going through. And so in those cases, a lot of times it can be touch and things like that can be perceived differently. And so setting those emotional boundaries from a spatial perspective is even more important during those times because there is that aspect of trauma bonding. Can anybody hear me? Dante, I don't know what's happening with you, sir. But your sound is like done, 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 done. Mo, and what you deal with as a chaplain, it is so important for you not to just do self-care, not to just spend time decompressing, which both of those things are equally important and necessary, extremely necessary, but creating the boundary. Yeah, gee, what on earth is right? Mr. Machismo, creating the boundary in the moment can put you in a healthier position to be able to let go.
I so agree, and we've talked about some different things in so many cases, as in being upfront and sharing things. Like, so say for instance, I'm on a call, and then somebody may say, "Well, Monicia, what are you?" I didn't volunteer. And I know sometimes, when I respond my truth, sometimes people don't know how to take my truth. Oh, she being rude today, or she's being this and that. No, I'm setting a boundary. No, I don't feel like talking today. Um, you called on me, and I didn't raise my hand. I didn't make a comment. And if when you deal with people on a ongoing basis in certain things, are you observing your environment? Do you know the people that you labor amongst? Okay, so I'm talking to Aquila today, and she's not really saying nothing, right? I know Aquila always has something to say. So when she's not saying nothing, I'm not going to pull on Aquila, um, because I know Aquila, if she has something to say, she's going to have something to say. And enforcing your boundaries and saying things right away does help enforce the boundaries. However, sometimes I think when you enforce your boundaries and you have healthy boundaries, people don't know how to take them. Some people do, some people don't. And it may be because the lack of information about healthy boundaries, or it could be a multitude of things. It could be, yeah, the lack of information, not don't have experience or not bold enough to say no, and no means no. You get what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
it depends, and in this society everybody take everything so personal, and everybody offended by just the smallest thing. So um yeah, stating your boundaries or stating something up front does assist with having healthy boundaries, and that's that.
For anybody who is able to see us, and I don't know how many can actually see us versus individuals that are just on call in. I did put up really briefly um, some should statements and different statements that you can use instead. Should statements they go along with cognitive distortion, and they bring a lot of guilt and shame and anxiety. And so I just wanted to kind of give that to those who are watching via Facebook and or what's the other one? YouTube. Yeah. But yes, to your point, Onicia, sometimes when you have healthy boundaries, individuals do have a hard time taking it in, especially when they are in a place of trauma and they're looking for someone to hold them. They're looking for someone to meet them exactly where they are, which could be in an in a lot of times probably is, in all honesty, an unhealthy place. And so you see it a lot. You see it a lot in movies. You see it a lot in a lot of different. Okay, you see it a lot in a lot of different areas where it's broadcast that someone got closer to someone than they were supposed to, right? Or that this social worker felt really connected to this kid, so she went to the kid's house and she was talking to the parents even when she's not supposed to. There's actually a show out, and I forget the platform, and this video wasn't sponsored anyway, so uh, where there's a therapist that actually goes into the lives of her clients and looks up their partners and finds these people in real life and tries in some ways to manipulate the outcome for the clients. And I know that this might sound far-fetched. I hope this sounds far-fetched, but um when you do not put forth proper emotional boundaries, these are also things that can happen, because then all of a sudden you are mixing their life for your own life, and also you are taking your role and reaching way too far. And you're taking away with that their autonomy, which is their ability to make choices. So I mean, maybe they, a person might say, to Mr. Machismo's comment, that person was rude. Not rude. It might have felt rude because they did not emotionally connect with you in the manner in which you were looking for. However, that was for them, and in some way, shapes and forms for you. Even when you look at a pastor, and I'm not talking about a pastor of a small church, but when you look at pastors of bigger churches, they have like a bunch of people in place between themselves and the congregation, so that the congregation can't directly pull on them. Well, why is that necessary? It's necessary because there has to be not only spatial boundaries but emotional boundaries, and where people are not as accessible because of what they do.
Another thing that is called structure, some structure, um, and
Yeah, but I'll just say I did hear you when you said I should not say should.
I know you heard me.
I have to I have to work on that. But that's a great example of a teaching moment. Monicia, you saying should too much. You didn't say Monicia, I'm saying it's too much, but you gave some information about why you shouldn't say should. And so that's something that I will go look into so I can work on not saying should. So I love how you did that.
Well, I
And it was
appreciate you.
no need for me to take offense to it, but yet it gave me something to make me better, right? So
I love how you took that, and I think that that's what we're all here for. Mo, Dante, me, even the listeners. We all are here to grow one another. That's why it's so important to me that this platform is interactive, because not only is it just the fact that one voice is when something is not diverse, is quite boring, right? If there was only one opinion and only one way to think and only one voice to hear, that is quite boring. But then it also doesn't allow room for me to grow. If I don't have a Dante, I don't have a Monicia, I don't have a Mark, I don't have a Michael, I don't have an audience that's pulling on me to be better, that's asking those questions or bringing those scenarios that really allow me to think in a different way. So I appreciate you, Mo. I appreciate you, Dante. Dante, I know that you have so much to bring to the table today, and I am so sorry that you were not able to join us in audio. But anyone who's on call in, you'll be able to see the comments that he made. Mark, I thank you so much for joining. You can definitely catch the replay on call in. You can also catch it on supportive advice, well, Facebook/supportive advice, as well as YouTube and possibly Instagram, and then that would be /Aquila Wheatley LMFT. So I appreciate you all. Definitely mark subscribe. Dante, I expect to be able to hear you next week, sir. Mo, thank you for your insight as always. And I will talk to you all next week. Yeah. Bye, everyone.
bye.